Mr. Gillette, one of the 4th grade teachers at Macon Cope Elementary. We're going to have a reptile roundup. I'm going to show you some common lizards, common snake, and another reptile, a tortoise, and we'll talk about these reptiles just a little bit. So here I have a small collection of side blotch lizards, one of the most common urban lizards in Southern California. We have these on campus at Macon Cope. You definitely have them in your neighborhood. Some interesting things about these guys. They're related, or they're in the iguana family. Very, very small one, obviously. They're mostly insect eaters, and they get their name from this. Just behind their leg, they have a spot, and that's that blotch right there, that mark behind his leg. That dark spot is where he gets his name. I'm going to flip these upside down, show you how you can tell males from females in a minute. If I have both here, I'm not sure, I haven't looked yet. And you can see a variety of patterns, all slightly camouflaged, very similar, but also very different. So we'll take a closer look at these guys and try and ID if we've got a boy or a girl here. This is the male, this one here, with the yellow and a little bit of blue on his back. This is the female. You can see they both have this spot under their front leg, and their coloring on these two is very different. So you could identify them just from their color pattern. I'm also going to show you on their tail, near their vent, how the scales are a little bit different and the way that you can make double sure in case the pattern is the same. So again, if you look at the scales on his tail right by his vent, this one, the scales are a little bit bigger on the base of his tail than they are on his vent. This one, the scales are exactly the same size. So this is the male with a little bit bigger scales after his vent where he goes to the bathroom. This one, the scales are the same size right after the vent. Okay, so this is a southern alligator lizard. These are common in Southern California. Obviously, we live in the South. There's another species in California called a northern alligator lizard. They live in Northern California. What a surprise. Two major differences between these southern ones are much larger. They can get to about 18 inches, the biggest one I've ever seen. And the color is a little bit more vibrant on these. There's more colors. The others are kind of plain. The other thing, the major difference between the two is the southern alligator lizard is an egg layer. The northern alligator lizard gives birth to live young. These are also common urban lizards. They live in our neighborhoods. If you have brush or things in your backyard on the ground that these can be underneath, you'll find them. They can climb very well into bushes and trees. They're not as fast as our side blotch lizards, which we looked at earlier, and the fence lizards we'll look at in a minute, but they are very commonly found in your yards. I'm going to put him on the ground and let you see him move, and you see that they are often mistaken for snakes because of the way they move and the fact that their legs are so small, you can't see them when they're moving quickly. Okay, so when these guys are caught, their defense is they will bite. They are aggressive. It's just kind of a pinch. Can't really hurt you, but it scares you. It's a little bit annoying. The other thing he'll do is, you saw that fall out of his vent there, they will poop on you. It's called venting, and lots of animals do this when they're scared or frightened, and that would cause most predators to drop him, not all. Like other lizards, alligator lizard can break his tail off and lose it if he needs to, and he can escape safely, and he will regrow it. Just takes him about a year to regrow it from all the way to scratch. One other thing I want you to notice is he's shedding. You can see the skin peeling back from his head and his neck area. When reptiles grow, their skin has to come off because it's very hard, and he is in the process of doing that. So in a day or two, he'll have a brand new shiny skin as all those scales peel off. So you can see when he moves, he has that serpentine motion just like a snake, side to side. And if you saw him on the ground, because his feet are so small, you might mistake him for a snake just because of the motion that he makes when he moves. Okay, so this is a western fence lizard, very, very common again around homes. That's where he gets his name. It's from fences because he likes to live on fences and walls near people. This is a very common Southern California lizard. This one is commonly called the blue belly because on the adult lizards, they have a blue patch on the bottom of their throat and on the sides of their stomach. This is just a teenager, a little juvenile, so the color is not there yet. Just a little bit showing up on this little guy's neck. This is a little male. This is just a baby, probably from last year, not very old. These guys can live for quite a while. They can live 10, 12 years. Unlike our side blotch lizard we looked at earlier, which has a lifespan of only 2 years, these guys could be in your yard for a long time. You could see the same one year after year. Again, insect eater, very, very common, found around people, and very, very easily visible. We have these on campus, and again, you have these in your neighborhood guaranteed. Here's a pair of western fence lizards. Again, I talked about them a minute ago, but I'm going to show you some specifics, especially on this one. This is a male, this is a female, and it's not the outer or the back that tells me that. When I flip them upside down, and I showed this on the side blotch, a little easier to see. Right there below his vent, you see those two big scales? Hope you can see that. This one does not have them. They're the same size. This is a female. And this one also shows the classic colors on his stomach where he gets his common name. So look at that blue iridescent scales on both sides of his stomach and then on his neck. That's where he gets his common name as a blue belly. If you've ever seen one of these things sitting on a fence or a wall and you did push-ups at you like he was daring you to come catch him, that's one of the ways they threaten each other. When they do the push-up, it exposes that blue color down at the lizard's eye view, not at yours, and that scares them. Doesn't scare me much, but apparently it does them. I want to show you something else. You see that this tail on this lizard changes color right there? This lizard has lost his tail at some point in his life and regrown it, and it takes about a year to get back to its original length. So you can see it's much bigger right there, thicker. The color and the pattern of the scales changes. So this one has clearly broken his tail off at some point, escaping predator, and then had time to regrow it. Again, western fence lizard, common name, whoop. It's a blue belly, and they are good at getting away. Again, you probably have these in your backyard. They do very well around people, so much so that they live better in yards and fences and things than almost any other of our local reptiles. So this particular reptile is a tortoise, more specifically a California desert tortoise. And if you look at him for a couple minutes, I want to talk about some of the features. They're easily recognized by this high domed shell. Tortoise is a type of turtle, it's just a land turtle. And one of the ways, or a couple of ways you can tell them from water turtles is they have a high dome shell. They're not smooth, they're not streamlined. Their feet are not webbed between the toes like a swimming turtle. In fact, their feet kind of look like they belong on an elephant. And their hind foot is a very good example. It looks like a little elephant foot. And it's actually called an elephantine foot. So these are common in California in the deserts. Used to be very common. They are endangered now because so many people collected them over the years for pets and accidentally introduced a respiratory disease into the wild population. So if you have a pet tortoise, you can't ever take him back out in the desert and let him loose because he might infect the other tortoises. But this again is a desert tortoise. They live mostly on the other side of the mountains. I have seen them wild in California in Riverside, out in the desert by 29 Palms. And a student actually found one in San Jacinto once wandering the neighborhood by De Anza, but I think it was probably somebody's pet that had simply gotten out. And again, this is a tortoise. It is in the turtle family. It's just a turtle that lives on land. He's designed for the desert. He's not designed for water. If you throw him in the water, he will probably drown if it was too deep because he cannot swim. His shell is not designed for that. Complete plant eater. He eats cactus, he eats grass, he eats anything that's green, gets all of his moisture from his food, and is very, very slow moving, and that shell will protect him for a long time. This is an extremely old desert tortoise, biggest one I've ever seen, and I think he's probably more than 50 years old. You can see the shape of the shell and the scales on his shell. The back of the turtle is called a carapace. Bottom of the shell is called a plastron. This particular one happens to be a male tortoise. And again, if you travel out in the desert and do some hiking around or jeeping, you have the potential of seeing one of these little guys. The two ways that you can tell that this is a male tortoise. The males have this projection on the bottom of their plastron called a gular chute. This is how the males fight with each other. They use this to push each other and tip each other over. The other way is down here on his shell. You can see that his shell is concave and dipped in. On a female, it will be straight across. And those are the two ways that you can tell whether or not these tortoises are boys or girls. And again, this is a boy tortoise. Okay, so this little guy, my class and my students will recognize, anybody who's been in my room, is our pet, class pet. This is a gopher snake. Very, very common snake in Southern California. Actually, one of the most common snakes in America. Widespread anyway. They live all the way from Canada to Mexico, all the way from California to New York. The interesting thing is, if you travel somewhere else other than California, it has a different common name. If you go to Montana, they call it a bull snake. If you go to Florida, they call it a pine snake. But it has the same genus and species. To a scientist, it's the same exact snake. This is a constrictor. He's completely harmless. When you catch them, they can be aggressive and bite or hiss, vibrate their tail, but there's no rattle. He's not venomous, cannot hurt you in any way, shape, or form. He eats mostly rodents. He will eat lizards, could eat other snakes, likes to eat birds and eggs. But again, they're very common in the fields. They get quite large. This is an average size one. They grow about 24 inches every 2 years or so, about 12 inches a year for the first couple years, then it slows down. And you know why we always measure snakes in inches? Well, he clearly doesn't have any feet, so there you go. Okay, I want you to notice two more things about this snake. You notice that his eyes are kind of bluish or grayish looking. That's because he's getting ready to shed, because he's growing. I've fed him since he's been out of hibernation, and the scale over his eye actually comes off when he sheds. And so right now he's just getting ready to shed. That's how you can tell. The other thing I want you to notice is his tongue flicking in and out. Some people think that's kind of scary, but this is actually how the snake smells. He has two little holes in the roof of his mouth called his Jacobson's organ. And when he sticks his tongue out, the little fork on the end of his tongue, he picks up particles from the air, pulls his tongue back into his mouth, and sticks that forked tongue right up into those two holes, and that sends a signal to his brain, helps him smell. Just like we smell in through our nose and particles fly into our nose and touch our olfactory organ, he just does it a little bit more deliberately. But their sense of smell is very important to them. You'll notice that there's no holes in the side of the snake's head. He has no ears, and it's one of the best ways to tell the difference between snakes and an animal called a legless lizard, which we have in California. I don't have one to show you, but there are lizards here with no legs, but they do blink, they have movable eyelids, and they have ears. So that's the best way to tell them apart. Here you can see how the snake moves. He has that S-shaped motion. It's called a serpentine motion. Now he's going to hiss and be snotty. We can do that too. See, he's trying to threaten me here and scare me. It doesn't work very well because I already know he's not dangerous. But if you saw this snake out in the field and you didn't know what it was, that might be kind of scary. But again, he's harmless, can't hurt you. They're actually beneficial. They eat rats and mice and things that we don't like around people. And so, good snake, very, very common. And if you ever see a snake in the field, very good chance it'll be one of these. So that's it for our reptiles today. As different as those guys looked, all those common lizards that we have in California, the side-blotched and the fence lizard and the alligator lizard, and that common snake, the gopher snake, and then the not so common desert tortoise, all have some things in common. They're all reptiles. They all have scales on their bodies. They all are cold-blooded. They all have a backbone. They're all in that same group, even though they look very different. Because we live in a warm place, we have lots of reptiles around. So keep your eye out in your backyard and around the neighborhood. You will probably see those lizards. Maybe not the tortoise. Possible to see that snake. But keep your eye out. Hope you're doing well, and look forward to seeing you guys back at school again. Bye-bye.